Welcome to Invisible Architecture. I'm Christina DiStefano, founder of CDDA, a development advisory platform exploring the hidden forces shaping luxury real estate, urban living, and buyer psychology. Each episode examines the emotional, strategic, and cultural shifts influencing the future of cities, from adaptive reuse and hospitality-driven living to identity, experience, and the evolving definition of luxury. This is Invisible Architecture. For decades, New York City was defined by expansion. Bigger towers, bigger skylines, bigger statements. Luxury became synonymous with spectacle, glass, height, visibility, scale. And for a long time, that model worked. But lately, I found myself thinking about a very different kind of future for New York City. Not necessarily taller, not louder, and not more expressive, but perhaps more intentional, more emotionally intelligent, more human. And that shift is part of what fascinates me so deeply about the growing conversation around adaptive reuse and office to residential conversion happening across New York right now. Because I don't think this is a movement simply about real estate. I think it's about identity, and I think it's about culture, and I think it reflects something much deeper about the way people want to live now, especially after the last several years. We're watching the city reevaluate itself in real time. Office buildings that once symbolized productivity, status, and corporate ambition are now being reconsidered entirely. Not because New York is failing, but because New York is evolving. And historically, that's actually what New York has always done best. It reinvents itself over and over again. And what's particularly interesting about this moment is that many of these office buildings were designed for a version of life that no longer fully exists. A version centered around rigid schedules, daily commuting, and compartmentalized living. But today, people are asking different questions. They're asking, how do I want to feel where I live? How do I want my life to function? What kind of environment supports my well-being, my identity, my relationships, my creativity? And I think that's incredibly important because for years, luxury real estate conversations focused heavily on finishes, amenities, and square footage. But increasingly, I believe buyers are making decisions emotionally first, even when they think they're making them logically. People want spaces that support the way they actually live now, not the way cities were designed decades ago. And that's where adaptive reuse becomes fascinating, because conversions inherently require reimagining, not just structurally, but emotionally. You're taking buildings designed for one human experience and transforming them into something entirely different. And when done thoughtfully, I think conversions can create some of the most compelling residential environments in the city. Not because they're trendy, but because many of them possess qualities modern construction sometimes struggles to replicate. Depth, texture, character, scale, materiality, permanence. There's often a certain emotional warmth to these buildings, a sense of history, a sense that the building has already lived a life before you arrived. And psychologically, I think people respond to that, especially now, because after years of hyper digital living, hyper visibility, and increasingly performative culture, I think many people are craving environments that feel grounding, private, human, and real. And interestingly, many conversion projects naturally lend themselves to those feelings. The layouts are often different, the proportions can feel more generous, the architecture may feel less repetitive. There's often more complexity and individuality within the spaces themselves. And in luxury real estate, individuality is becoming increasingly valuable, especially as buyers become more sophisticated. I also think we're entering an era where hospitality is beginning to influence residential living in much deeper ways, not just aesthetically, but experientially. People want homes that feel calming, curated, effortless, and emotionally supportive. And I think the future of development will increasingly revolve around experience rather than excess. And that doesn't mean that luxury disappears, but it means that luxury evolves. The future of luxury may not simply be about visibility anymore. It may be about intentionality, privacy, emotional quality of life, and a stronger relationship between the person and the environment they inhabit. That's part of why I believe adaptive reuse is becoming such an important conversation, not simply because cities need more housing, but because these projects have the potential to create a different kind of urban living experience altogether, one that feels more integrated, more nuanced, more connected to the emotional realities of modern life. And of course, there are enormous complexities involved in these projects. Financial complexities, architectural complexities, political complexities, and infrastructure challenges. This isn't easy work. And I think that's why the next generation of successful projects will require much more than just construction expertise. They will require vision, emotional intelligence, strategic positioning, an understanding of buyer psychology, an understanding of how people want to experience cities right now. And I think that's where the future conversation becomes really interesting, because I don't believe the future of development is only about what we build. I think it's also about what we preserve, what we reinterpret, what we humanize, and perhaps most importantly, what we make people feel, especially in a city like New York, a city constantly balancing ambition and intimacy, history and reinvention, velocity and identity. Adaptive reuse sits directly inside that tension. And maybe that's why it feels so relevant right now, because in many ways, New York itself is going through a kind of adaptive reuse. The city is reevaluating what matters, what people value, how they want to live, how they want to connect, and what kind of future feels worth building. That, to me, is the real story. Not simply the conversion of buildings, but the conversion of priorities. And I think over the next decade, we're going to see some of the most important conversions in luxury real estate emerge from exactly this intersection between psychology, identity, hospitality, urban planning, and emotional experience, which is why I wanted to begin this series here, because adaptive reuse is not just changing buildings. It may very well change the emotional future of the city itself. And honestly, I think that's a conversation worth paying attention to. And that's the invisible architecture. Thank you for listening to Invisible Architecture. I'm Christina DiStefano, luxury real estate advisor in New York City. New episodes are released twice a month, where we explore the unseen forces shaping how we live, choose, and belong. Until next time, remember, the most powerful architecture is invisible first.